The possibility of time travel is at the top of humanity's fantasies, right? It would allow us to avoid great catastrophes, correct some mistakes from the past, and even manipulate outcomes in our favor. Imagine that. Who wouldn't want to play the lottery with all the right numbers already in hand? However, it seems to be a consensus that time travel can only exist in works of fiction and in our imagination, as it appears to break some fundamental physical principles that are crucial for maintaining the universe. But is that really true? In today's video, I'll bring you some evidence that seems to disagree with that idea. We will look at images, hear stories, and investigate cases that are hard to explain as anything other than time displacement. You might be surprised to discover that there is evidence even in biblical texts. Curious? Let's dive deeper. Let's start with the visual evidence. Some images produced or captured throughout history really suggest that, yes, time travel could be real. The case of the hipster time traveler is the most famous of all, and you've probably seen the image circulating around. It shows a young man dressed in a way that is completely different from the people around him. Let's take a look. This photo was taken in 1941 during the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in British Columbia, Canada. A large crowd gathered to watch the event. But while practically everyone was wearing hats and tailored suits fashionable at the time, a young man on the right side seemed completely out of place. Not just in style, but in time. He is standing on the right, wearing clothes that could be considered modern today, including sunglasses, a t-shirt, and a zippered sweater. Additionally, he seems to be holding a portable camera, but several other people are doing the same, probably because it was an occasion worth capturing. But was he really documenting it for his own time? Our next image was also taken in a photograph. It shows the celebration of Brazil's second World Cup win. The championship was held in Chile, and our team won the title over Czechoslovakia with a score of 3-1. However, when Captain Mauro Ramos raised the Jules Rimet trophy, something unusual happened. Pay attention. Many people raised their cameras to capture the moment, but at the bottom, right in front of the player holding the trophy, it seems there is a person taking a photo with a flip phone, one of those that became popular in the early 2000s. Look, I am not a tech expert, but I am sure these devices did not exist back then. Many skeptics argued that there would be no reason for a time traveler to use such outdated technology, since we have long since moved on to smartphones. But I think they forgot that foldable phones have recently come back, revamped and adapted for this new phase. And who knows what future technology holds, right? Speaking of smartphones, it wasn't just old cameras that captured moments of these devices wandering around. At least that's what this oil painting by Peter de Hooch from 1670 seems to suggest. As you can see, besides the girl with a fishing rod at the door, the suspicious dog, and the woman sitting by the window, it looks like the man entering the scene from right to left is literally holding a modern cell phone. Many suggest that the young man is a messenger and that he is holding a letter. However, I don't know about you, but the letters I know look very different from that. Along the same lines, there is another artwork that seems to depict an electronic device out of its time. It is a mural created by the Italian artist Umberto Romano in 1937. The painting, titled Mr. Pynchon and the Settling of Springfield, depicts the arrival of settlers in the city in the 17th century. However, one of the natives is holding a rather curious object. If we're on the same page, you thought the same thing as I did. Once again, yes, it's a smartphone. There's no way around it. The object is black, rectangular, and even the way the native holds and looks at it resembles how we interact with devices today. And we can't even say that the artist inserted the image into that context in jest because, as I mentioned, the painting was made in the 1930s, while modern cell phones were only invented in 2007. How do you explain that? And there's more. It wasn't just smartphones that stole the show from time travelers. Its older cousin did too, laptops. Exactly. At least that's what it looks like when we look at our next image. Doesn't it clearly seem that this woman is manipulating a laptop that her assistant is holding? I mean, the shape is the same, the way they're holding it, even the grip on the upper lid. Could it all just be a coincidence? This work belongs to a funerary relief that was sculpted in 100 BC, over 2 millennia ago. One possible explanation is that people said it was a jewelry box or something similar, but, at least in my view, jewelry boxes are quite different from that. And what about the hieroglyphs carved in the Temple of Seti in Egypt? Among other carvings, three main figures stand out. One that resembles a modern helicopter, another that looks like a flying car from a cartoon, and the last one, which seems to be between a spaceship and a submarine. Don't believe it? Then see for yourself. This sanctuary, also known as the Great Temple of Abydos, was built by Pharaoh Seti between 1290 and 1270 BC, a long time before the invention of any modern technology. Such records are usually associated with the theory of ancient astronauts, superior beings who supposedly visited Earth to impart some knowledge. However, some believe that this information was not passed down by aliens, but by Earthlings from the future. Was that what allowed the construction of the pyramids? However, for skeptics, these depictions of vehicles are merely psychological phenomena known as pareidolia, which makes us see patterns, like shapes in clouds or rocks, that are just interpretations by our brain. Well, these shapes seem to be much more than that to me. But it's not just photos, images, and sculptures that provide evidence for time travel. There are many stories, some passed down orally, others recorded in sacred books of various religions, which also point to the same fact. There are people who are capable of traveling along the timeline. A classic example is present in Hindu culture. In the ancient text of the Mahabharata, written sometime in the 6th century BC, it is recounted that King Revata traveled to the heavens to meet with the creator god, Brahma, and only returned to Earth hundreds of years in the future. When he returned and realized that many ages had passed, the king asked the god what had happened and was told that this temporal dilation is common in such journeys, since time tends to pass differently in different planes of existence. Something similar occurs in the Japanese legend of Urashima Taro, transmitted through generations for centuries. It is said that a fisherman visited the underwater palace of the dragon god Ryujin. He stayed there for 3 days, but when he returned to the surface, he no longer recognized any of the inhabitants of his fishing village. His house was in ruins, and all his family members had disappeared. When he noticed this, he realized that 300 years had already passed. According to the Swiss writer and archaeologist Erich von Däniken, there is something similar narrated in the Bible. At a certain point in the book of Jeremiah, the prophet was conversing with some friends, and there was a young boy nearby named Abimelech. Jeremiah then asks the boy to go outside Jerusalem and pick some figs from the hills around the city. The boy complies, but as he was returning, there was a flash of light followed by a gust of wind, and he loses consciousness shortly after. After a while, when he regains consciousness, it is almost nighttime. He hurries back to the city, but when he returns, he is confused by the sight of several soldiers he had never seen before. When he asks about Jeremiah, he is told that he had left 62 years ago. Bizarre, right? But is it really possible to travel through time? According to current science, the answer is, it depends. That's because we can say with a certain degree of confidence that traveling to the future is quite plausible. But traveling to the past would be extremely difficult or even impossible. According to Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, time is not a rigid dimension, a fixed line as we once imagined. It is part of a fabric along with space, and therefore it can be influenced by other forces, such as gravity, for example. Have you ever seen those experiments where a person places a heavy object on a cloth and launches smaller objects around it? This experiment is often used to show how space is warped by gravity. But it is interesting to note that space and time are intertwined in the same fabric. Therefore, when space is distorted, time will also be affected, and it will pass differently depending on the observer's point of view. And it's not just gravity that can influence time. Speed can too. That's why, according to Einstein's theory, if an object with mass, like a person or a spaceship, travels at speeds close to that of light, time will pass more slowly for them, as if the clock slowed down during that period. Situations like these, which until now have been considered only as thought experiments, gave rise to the twin paradox. As we know, twin siblings, whether identical or fraternal, were generated at the same time and are the same age. However, if one of them makes a journey at speeds close to that of light or travels to a more massive planet than Earth and then returns, we will have two brothers of different ages. The one who traveled will be younger, as time passed more slowly for him. This is due to an effect known as time dilation. This effect has been proven experimentally by placing synchronized atomic clocks in orbit around the Earth. The clocks that remained stationary counted time faster than those that traveled around the Earth. But while going to the future might be possible in these extreme circumstances, traveling to the past would require a violation of several physical laws, like the law of causality. And even if it were possible, would it be advisable? If we follow the reasoning of the grandfather paradox, where a time traveler accidentally kills his own grandfather before the time when his father was born, he might prevent his own birth. In that case, if he was never born, how could he go back in time to kill his grandfather? Regardless of the complexity of time travel, the answer to this mystery remains open. Was King Revata or Urashima Taro an early example of time travelers? Were the people in the photos, sculptures, and paintings visitors from another era? Or is this all just a mixture of imagination and unlikely coincidences? You decide. And who knows, maybe one day we will find the answers to these questions in a past that is yet to come.